Today's video is sponsored by... Nah, I'm just fucking with y'all. I ain't that big yet. But I do have a plug real quick before we start the video. If you're a fan of professional wrestling on top of animation, then consider checking out my podcast, Crit's Ringside Chat. We're starting small, but hopefully we can get those numbers up. Alright, on with the video. Why do people hate Black April so much? I mean, I can venture a couple of guesses as to why. But seriously, what's the problem with it? Well, according to the people who care way too much about these things, there are 3 usual arguments, and I'm going to show you why each and every one of them is bullshit. Now, this is an argument that I've seen mostly levied at the Mutant Mayhem version, so we're going to tackle this one first. People seem to have a bigger problem with April from Mutant Mayhem than they do with April from Rise. And the reason I see the most with this version specifically is because they think Mutant Mayhem April is ugly. Let's talk about that. First off, this version of April is a teenager. She's not a full-grown adult like the comics, the movies, or the earlier cartoons. Megan Fox, this is not. This version of April isn't meant to be attractive because being attractive isn't part of her character. Usually when there's some sort of appeal added to a character like this, it's meant to be in the form of some kind of fan service. That's why you have the OG April with the thang hanging out of the jumpsuit, because yeah, this is the outfit you would wear as a journalist, for all of the people who grew up in the 80s on the cusp of puberty to ogle at. Now don't get me wrong, she's a lovely lady, very beautiful woman, but seriously, journalists don't wear this. But there was no fan service written in mind for this version of April, so why should she be conventionally attractive? Now I can hear some people saying, but that shouldn't stop them from making her at least look visually appealing, and to that I say 2 things. First off, yes she does. Especially when you compare her to her concept art. But so what if she's a bit shorter or a little chubbier? She still looks visually appealing for the movie she's in. Which leads me to the second point. Mutant Mayhem is a very ugly movie. And I mean that in a good way. The film has a really grungy, grody aesthetic that I haven't seen out of the Turtles in a minute. And the style and the writing reflects that. You know, what with April being Puke Girl, or all the mutants getting updated designs that are, you know, a lot more gross than they were in their previous designs. Again, in a good way, because TMNT was always a bit of a gross franchise, so it's nice to see a version embrace that a little. Plus, look at April compared to some of these other humans. Y'all think April really looks ugly standing next to these motherfuckers? I think it's telling how in the Tails cartoon, where the humans look a little less ugly than they do in the movies, April looks pretty much exactly the same. Now if this wasn't a movie where all the humans were supposed to look ugly, and that I haven't seen this criticism towards the Rise April, I'd say there was racism afoot. Who the fuck am I kidding, there's still racism afoot. It's just easier to hide thanks to observable stuff. Speaking of race, let's move on to the next argument. Now this is an argument you hear a lot. The idea that race swapping characters is completely unnecessary and that the energy could have been spent making actual new characters of that race. And to that I say, yeah, sure, I totally agree with that. I'm with you on that. We do need more characters with more representation that are new and not just reskinning old characters. But here's where I disagree. For one, more often than not the people who say this would end up hating the new characters anyway, because let's be honest, they're bigots. Let me be clear, not everyone is like this. I'm not painting everyone with a bigoted brush before any of you come down my neck for it. But these specific motherfuckers are never satisfied, so why take them in specific seriously? For another, race swapping in TMNT is nothing new. I mean, how soon we forget that Baxter Stockman was originally a black man before the '87 cartoon made him white. Now the reasoning behind it, that they didn't want Shredder abusing a black man during apartheid, doesn't change the fact that the race was swapped. And yet I don't hear as many people getting mad over this change as they do over April. Call it what you want, nostalgia, hypocrisy, but if you're gonna get mad at one, and the reason you're mad is exclusively the race swap, keep that same energy for the other. On top of all of that, I ain't gonna hold you, I kinda prefer April being black. Honestly, something about it that I can't really put into words. Could be that I find the newer designs more appealing, or that these new Aprils have more personality than the previous ones.
Is he gonna break again? Not on my watch. Again. And she does. Ha! In your face! Did you get that, April? Did you film that? Sorry, last semester's all the stuff you did is a lot of this done. Yeah.
Not to mention, the Ninja Turtles have been going on for almost 50 years now. With all these cartoons, video games, comic books, movies, what's the big deal if 1 or 2 of them make April black? And if they keep doing it, again, what's the big deal? The other things where April are white still exists. Go back and fulfill your nostalgia with them, and let new writers tell new stories. Speaking of new stories, there is one last argument that these people make, and I'll be honest, it is a big one. People hate Black April O'Neil because it's a shift in the source material. Now, for the sake of getting this one argument out of the way, I'm gonna have to veer a bit off topic. If only because I know some of y'all will bring it up in the comments, so we may as well address it now. Was April O'Neil ever meant to be black? For that, we have to look at the source material. No, not that one. There we go, that's the bitch. Remember where it all started. Now, people tend to take the appearances of early April, such as the darker shade on her skin and the curly hair, to mean that she was always meant to be black. But actually, that's not true. There seem to be a few conflicting reports on this. Leard had always envisioned April to be white. Eastman would say that April is of mixed descent since she was based on his then girlfriend at the time. But neither have ever really come out to say that April was meant to be black. And the reason for the curly hair was due to the style of the time, with lots of women in the 80s wearing their hair in a perm. Plus, we can compare her with a character who we know for sure is meant to be black, Baxter Stockman, and see that the skin tones don't match up. You could argue that April is meant to be light-skinned, but at that point I feel like we're just arguing semantics. So April was never meant to be black, and these new TMNT tunes are straying from the source material to make useless changes, right? Well, if we're gonna have outrage over this type of change, then let me see the outrage for these other changes, such as Hun from the 2003 series going from a big blonde purple dragon thug to a Bruce Lee clone in the 2012 series to a Latino in the Tails cartoon. Rocksteady going from a plain white guy in the 87 cartoon to a Russian in the 2012 series. And if we really want to stretch it, he was Irish in the Michael Bay movies based on the fact that Seamus played him. Leatherhead going from a hunter in the 87 cartoon to a scientist in the 2003 cartoon to a regular pet crocodile that got mutated in the 2012 cartoon, back to a hunter but gender swapped in the Mutant Mayhem movie. What about Casey Jones going from a man to a woman in Rise to there's two of them? Oh, you think I'm just limited to race and gender swaps? Cause we're just getting started, fucko. If we really want to play the didn't follow the source material card, then we can fucking play it. We're playing Balatro up in this bitch with this. Like how about April was never a reporter in the original comics and was actually an assistant to Baxter Stockman. We already mentioned Baxter being whitewashed for the 87 cartoon, but how about the fact that he never turned into a fly in the original comics? How about Krang replacing the Utroms in the 87 cartoon? Say, did you know that the Shredder actually died in the very first issue of the TMNT comic, despite him now being synonymous with the Turtles that it's impossible to imagine them without him, and only came back to life a few issues later? Or how about the fact that Splinter was actually just a pet rat to Hamato Yoshi, and not actually Hamato Yoshi mutated into a rat? All of these things that fans swear by as standard for the franchise were never actually part of the original source material. Ooh, you wanna keep going? We can keep fucking going, get those Balatro multipliers on. How about the fact that all of the Turtles wore red masks in the original comics and pretty much all looked the same, with the only way to tell them apart was their weapons and the convenience of somebody saying their name so that way we could know who was talking at any given time. Did you know that Raphael wasn't always the hot-headed one that was looking for a fight? That actually came from the first movie, with the original 87 Raph being a snide, sarcastic type. Speaking of Raph, how about the fact that his mask covering half of his face has become the norm lately, being seen in comics, Rise, Mutant Mayhem, the Bay movies, and Fortnite? How about Karai going from being Shredder's daughter to being Splinter's daughter that the Shredder kidnapped and raised as his own in 2012 to being Splinter's ancestor in Rise? How about the fact that Splinter's fur color seems to change with every single new piece of TMNT media, going from brown to gray to black to back to brown? How about the fact that Shredder wasn't even human in the 2003 show? Yeah, everybody loves the 2003 Shredder, but no one wants to talk about how it's betraying the source material when he's not even a fucking human being. But April having a little extra melanin is what gets you mad? A de-aged April who has psychic powers and is caught making out with Donatello is okay, but a sassier Black April who doesn't even want to entertain a romance with Leonardo is too far. An April, by the way, that I'd say is closer to the quote-unquote source material that everyone wants to lord over than the 2012 series, since at least Mutant Mayhem April wants to be a journalist just like the 87 April. Bottom fucking line. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has never rigidly stuck to its source material. Change is the name of the game. Every iteration of TMNT has done something radically different from the previous version. It could be making the turtle's master actually turn into a rat rather than just being a rat that knows ninjutsu. It could be Raph developing a whole new personality that becomes a mainstay for years to come. It could be the Shredder not being human. It could be that Splinter never actually learned ninjutsu from a master and instead learned it from a book or old self-defense videos. A bigger focus on romance with human characters. A bigger focus on the fact that they're teenagers and not just low-key adult turtles who call themselves teenagers. New weapons, distinct body shapes. It could be April O'Neil being black. Who the fuck cares? The argument of this doesn't fit the source material falls apart pretty quickly if you really stop to think about how Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has only really stuck to the bare bones necessity of the premise and everything else is pretty fucking loose. I said this in another video, so I'm gonna say it again, this time with a little bit more clarity. 4 turtles are mutated and become ninjas under the tutelage of their rat master Splinter in the sewers of New York, named after famous artists of the Italian Renaissance. Normally, Leo is blue, Raph is red, Mikey is orange, and Donnie is purple. Their closest human ally is April O'Neil. Their most personal enemy is the Shredder. Everything else about the franchise, including weaponry, villain backstory, races, change them however the fuck you want, as long as you have a clear-cut vision on how to make them work. If this shit really gets you mad, and I mean gets you so mad that you're frothing at the mouth and saying you're never gonna watch, or they ruined the franchise you love without you ever giving it a chance, well, I've got one word. God, I love being a turtle, but you can call me Crit.